Okay, let's get right into it. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to challenge pretty much everything you think you know about the modern workplace. If you've spent any time at all in management or HR, you've definitely absorbed certain universal truths about how an organization is supposed to run. But what if I told you the solutions we rely on every single day are actually just popular myths? Well, we are going to completely dismantle those myths using the principles of evidence-based practice, and we're drawing our insights directly from the work of organizational psychologist Professor Rob Briner.
Stephen Hawking actually hit the nail on the head when he said, "The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge." And honestly, this perfectly captures the core problem in management today. Our biggest blind spots are at the things we just don't know. Ignorance is totally fine. It naturally prompts you to go look for answers, right? The real danger is the stuff we are absolutely 100% certain is true, but actually isn't. Because when we operate on false certainties, we are just throwing away time, money, and energy.
So, Section 1, the illusion of knowledge. Let's go ahead and test a few of your own workplace assumptions to see this illusion in action.
Think about this question for a second. Has average job tenure decreased in the past 10 years? We hear the narrative everywhere, don't we? The world is moving faster, volatility is way up, company loyalty is dead, and everyone is just constantly job hopping. If I were to ask a room full of managers right now, almost every single hand would shoot up, saying, yes, absolutely, tenure has decreased. But here is the crazy part. When we step back and actually look at the national statistics from the UK and the US, average job tenure really hasn't shifted much at all since the mid-1970s. In fact, over the last 10 years, it's either stayed exactly the same or gone up slightly. This completely contradicts the whole popular narrative. Think about what that means. If you're building your entire talent retention strategy around the firm belief that tenure is rapidly shrinking, you are literally trying to solve a problem that the data says doesn't even exist.
Okay, let's bust another quick myth. When we track job satisfaction levels over the last 30 years, the prevailing narrative is always either workers are increasingly miserable, or, on the flip side, our modern workplace perks are making us happier than ever. But when you actually plot the data, the trend line is completely flat. For 3 solid decades, the percentage of people who say they're completely or somewhat satisfied with their jobs basically hasn't budged. It's just a really powerful reminder of why we constantly need to check our assumptions.
Moving right along to Section 2, the employee engagement myth. We're going to take this critical evidence-based lens and point it directly at the holy grail of modern HR.
Look, employee engagement sounds amazing on paper, but foundationally, it's got some massive flaws. Let's walk through the core issues here. First off, there is absolutely no agreed-upon definition. Some people define it as an attitude, others as a behavior. So you could sit through 50 different presentations on engagement and literally be listening to 50 completely different concepts. Second, it is highly correlated with basic job satisfaction. And third, and this is a big one, it lacks hard evidence that it actually causes an increase in performance. Let's dig into those numbers a bit.
Get a load of this massive number, a 0.9 correlation. For context, in statistics, a 1.0 is a perfect identical match. The incredibly popular Gallup Q12 engagement survey actually has a 0.9 correlation with a basic job satisfaction measure from the 1960s. Essentially, what we are calling engagement today is really just a 1960s job satisfaction survey repackaged with a shiny new marketing label. And if it's not actually a new idea, we really have to ask ourselves why we are spending billions of dollars treating it like one.
And now for the most dramatic number of all, 0. A major foundational HR report that heavily claimed engagement precedes performance cited exactly 0 longitudinal studies to back that claim up. Every single study they cited was cross-sectional. All that means is they just measured things at one single snapshot in time, and you simply cannot prove cause and effect from that. In fact, it makes total sense that when people are performing better at their jobs, they subsequently feel more engaged. Right now, there's a total absence of high-quality evidence proving that if you artificially intervene to boost engagement, performance is just going to magically follow.
So, if popular solutions like engagement are built on such shaky ground, what's the alternative? Section 3, defining evidence-based management. Evidence-based management, or EBM, is formally defined as the conscientious, explicit, and judicious use of multiple sources of evidence to make decisions. Let's translate that into plain English. Conscientious means you actually try, you put in the effort to find the data. Explicit means you write it down and share your reasoning, no more relying on some invisible gut feeling. And judicious is arguably the most important piece. You critically judge the quality of the evidence, effectively filtering out the garbage data before you make a call. Which brings us to a golden rule of EBM. Trust the evidence, not the experts. Now, don't get me wrong, experts can be fantastic for explaining complex concepts, but true EBM relies on the total body of evidence, not just someone's eminence or popularity. Think about it. An expert who has spent 30 years selling one specific solution is naturally going to be biased toward that solution. Evidence-based management asks you to look at the total available data rather than just blindly taking a guru's word for it.
To actually pull this off, you follow 5 structured steps. 1. Ask a question. 2. Acquire evidence. 3. Critically appraise that evidence. 4. Apply it. And 5. Assess the outcome. Taking this stepped approach is so crucial because, as humans, our cognitive biases, combined with the corporate pressure to look decisive, naturally push us to rush into fast, poorly informed decisions. This 5-step structure basically acts as a mental speed bump, slowing us down just enough to ensure we don't drive right off a cliff.
So where exactly are we getting all this evidence? Let's get into Section 4, the 4 sources of evidence.
A big misconception is that evidence-based management is just about sitting around reading academic journals all day. It's not. It requires triangulating 4 very distinct pillars. First, practitioner expertise. That's your own professional, hard-earned experience. Second, organizational data, your internal analytics and metrics. Third, stakeholders, the actual people impacted by the decision. And fourth, scientific evidence, what the peer-reviewed research says. You need all 4 of these because each source has its own inherent blind spots. Triangulating them is what gives you the truest picture.
Let's zero in on that stakeholder pillar for just a second. You could easily have the most scientifically perfect, data-backed solution in the whole world, but if you impose it on employees or line managers who don't understand it, don't agree with it, or just plain won't accept it, it's going to fail, period. Simply asking stakeholders, hey, do you even notice this problem? And will you actually implement this solution? Is a crucial reality check. It saves companies from wasting millions on initiatives nobody actually wants. Notice the stark contrast between these 2 mindsets. Traditional management usually just jumps straight to a solution, relying heavily on a manager's gut feeling or whatever an external consultant says. Evidence-based management fundamentally shifts that behavior. It demands diagnosing the problem first and consulting multiple, varied data sources, because true professionals don't just react to symptoms, they rigorously investigate the underlying disease. Which perfectly sets up our final section, Section 5. Diagnose before you solve. We are going to focus on what is definitely the single most critical, yet frequently skipped step in modern organizations. Consider what we like to call the Einstein heuristic. There's this famous, albeit anecdotal quote that says, if you were given an hour to save the world, you should spend 59 minutes analyzing the problem and 1 minute implementing the solution. That massive 59-minute slice represents diagnosis. Human nature intensely craves cognitive ease. We just want to jump in and fix things because it feels good and looks super productive to our bosses. But the really hard, absolutely necessary work is defining the real problem first.
But in reality, organizational behavior totally reverses this. The typical approach is spending maybe 1 minute glancing at a problem and then 59 minutes rolling out a massive, expensive program. We fall headfirst into the trap of solutioneering. That's when you define your problem simply as the absence of your preferred solution. For instance, saying, oh, our problem is that we don't have an engagement program. That's not a problem. The real problem might be terrible customer service or faulty software, but we completely rush past that just to buy a shiny new training module.
This brings us to a striking quote from Professor Briner that really ties this entire explainer together. He notes that oftentimes, engagement is a non-solution in search of a non-problem. Pushing vague, sweeping solutions without a clear evidence-based diagnosis is pretty much the ultimate waste of time and money. If you don't actually know what specific organizational issue you are trying to fix, just throwing a blanket engagement initiative at it is pure guesswork. So how can you actually apply this tomorrow morning? Well, here are your actionable takeaways. First, don't go it alone. Being the only evidence-based lone wolf in an office is rough. Find some allies. Second, and most importantly, just start asking, what is the actual problem here? And third, consciously force yourself and your team to stop thinking about solutions until that core problem is clearly defined using multiple sources of evidence.
I'm going to leave you with a final provocative thought. Take a hard look at your own daily workflow, the projects you're currently pushing, and the initiatives your company is funding right now. Are you truly solving a real, diagnosed problem based on solid evidence, or are you just implementing a popular solution because everyone else is doing it?
Trust the evidence, ask the hard questions, and stop treating assumptions as facts. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I challenge you to start diagnosing before you solve.